Good evening. I now call to order the October 28th, 2024 meeting of the East Bend School District Board of School Directors. You now all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. First item tonight is something that we always look forward to. It deals with student recognition. This evening, we're going to honor our 2025 National Merit Scholarship semifinalists and commended students. And I'd like to turn the floor over to Dr. Campbell.
All right, good evening, everyone. Last October, over 1.3 million juniors in high schools across the country entered the 2025 National Merit Scholarship Program by taking the preliminary SAT, or the PSAT. The nationwide pool of semifinalists represents less than 1% of U.S. high school seniors total, and it includes the highest scoring entrants from each state. Tonight, we're thrilled to be able to honor 3 National Merit Scholar semifinalists and 7 National Merit Scholar commended students. Our semifinalists are academically talented high school seniors now, currently, who will have the opportunity to continue in the competition for over 6,000 scholarships that are worth nearly $26 million. And so they will continue in the competition, and those scholarships will be named later this spring. These 3 individuals are not only performing outstanding in terms of their academics here at the high school, they are also heavily involved in school extracurricular and co-curricular activities, and certainly contributing members of our community as well. And so at this point, I am going to call each of them individually. We'll start with our National Merit semifinalists. And Dan Whitmer, please come up and be recognized. Colby Zhang. Congratulations, Colby. Dan, we need you to come back up then. Stay here. And William Zhang. In addition to these 3 young men, we have the National Merit Scholar commended students. We have 7 Emmaus High School students who've received the letters of commendation in recognition of their outstanding academic promise as well. Congratulations to our National Merit commended students. And again, at this point, I invite Mrs. Gariello to come forward. Oh, she is here. Thank you. You blended right in with the kids. Mrs. Gariello has your certificate to present to you. Aiden Cannon. Michael Carter. You have to stay here. Oh, Michael's not here tonight. Braden Dang. Connor Iyengar. Congratulations, Connor. Andrew Lee. Not here this evening. Griffin Messenlaner. And Anna Smith, is she here this evening? Also not able to be here. Let's give all of our semifinalists as well as our commended students another round of applause. I think it's funny how they're like hiding here behind us. The other piece that I wanted to say is address our students in terms of, on behalf of the school board, our administration, our teaching staff, our support staff, and really our entire school community. We are so incredibly proud of you. Again, not only for the outstanding academic commitment that you've demonstrated, not just as high school students. I think all of you have been with us almost your entire school career in East Penn. It's been really awesome hearing about some of those elementary and middle school experiences as well. We know how hard you've worked to perform as well as you have academically, and we also are so very proud of the way in which you have really immersed yourself in our school community. Again, many of you, I recognize several varsity athletes among us here, members of our chess team, our academic team, just continue to excel in many areas of your time with us in the East Penn School District. I also look out to our family members who are here tonight, and I recognize that there are extended families at home as well. As a parent, I sincerely appreciate all that you have done for your students in terms of supporting the importance of performing well and doing well in school, the importance of being well-rounded young men, young women, giving back to the community. And I know that that's a tremendous amount of effort that you have put into that as well. And so we appreciate your support for all that we do here in the East Penn School District. And at this point, we're going to ask you to come to the center, and we're going to have a media moment. Laura.
If you don't mind lining up alphabetically, I'm sure you all know.
Stick your tongue out.
Why did you try to sneak in there?
I said you just stick your tongue.
Yeah, no, right.
Yeah, let's do it alphabetically.
Into the mic.
Do this. Where's the seat?
Score high on the same guy, just don't know their alphabet.
It's gonna get you.
Nice talking, Bob. Nice talking.
Like whack-a-mole.
All right, again, congratulations on your achievement, and thank you for coming tonight and sharing some of your valuable time. Feel free to come back. Okay, next part of the meeting is another thing I look forward to in the fall, which is introducing our new EHS Student Government Association school board student representatives here to give their report. And to introduce our SGA reps, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Campbell.
Yes, this is always one of our most exciting times when we have our SGA reps come and share great happenings, particularly at Emmaus High School with our school board and our community. So I'm really honored to be able to introduce SGA Vice President Lindsay Kaler, who's joining us over here, and SGA School Board Liaison Alexandra, who goes by Lexi Howard. Lindsay is a senior, Lexi's a junior here at Emmaus High School, and they will be with us one meeting a month. And we're super excited and really honored to have them, as well as, again, similar to the students that we just honored, you will find that they are really great representatives of the students that we have here in our school district. I want to just share a little bit about their outstanding accomplishments so that you have a sense of who they are as individuals, because they will be joining us over the next several months. In addition to serving as vice president of SGA, Lindsay participates in Interact Club, Hornet Ambassadors, Avidum, and National Honor Society. Outside of school, she's involved in competitive dance, and she also assists with several classes at her dance studio. She's also currently a lead server at the Udder Bar, where she's worked for the past 2 years. So Lindsay is incredibly busy, obviously, not only with her academic and schoolwork here at Emmaus High School, but also with her community activities. Lexi is a school board liaison for SGA. She loves being involved here at Emmaus High School as well as within the community. She's a copywriter for our school yearbook and serves as ambassador as well as a new student mentor. This is her first year engaging in the History Day competition, and so we look forward to hear how she's doing with that. In her free time, she enjoys watching TV. You probably don't have much time to binge watch anything. Listening to music, playing board games, and hanging out with friends and knitting. And so in addition to all those great interests, she's now here as one of our representatives. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our students, and again, just say welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Lexi and I are excited and are thankful to continue having a seat at the table as the voice of the student body. SGA is a student-run organization that represents the student body of EHS, and our main functions include advocating for students, planning and running school-wide events, supporting leadership opportunities, and organizing service projects within the school and community. We recently wrapped up Homecoming Week, including 5 unique spirit days, Powder Puff, a club tailgate in which 36 clubs were represented, a pep rally, which had fun student engagement, including a tug-of-war game, and finally, a homecoming dance that was attended by 1,300 students. The theme was Glow, and the dance was held in both gyms and the courtyard. We wanted to acknowledge some fall sports, so congratulations to the EHS football team as they just finished their regular season on Friday as EPC champions. Emmaus will be hosting the first round of football playoffs against Nazareth. Field hockey, girls soccer, and girls volleyball all compete in district semis tomorrow against Parkland. Boys soccer also plays in district semis tomorrow against Northampton. Girls cross country won first place in districts, and boys cross country came in second. Both teams are heading to states. And girls tennis finished the season with a 15-5 record. So congratulations to all the players and good luck to everyone who's continuing.
My name is Lexi, and I'm the school board liaison for SGA, and I'm very happy to be here as well. I wanted to recognize some of the clubs and academic achievements that have happened recently at the school. So currently the AP exams for AP students taking an AP class, they can take the AP exam in May so that they can earn college credit while they're still in high school. And registration just opened on October 21st and will end this Friday on November 1st. Along with that, the fall play opens up on Thursday, where the EHS theater department has been rehearsing Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express, and it will run from Thursday through Saturday at the Emmaus Auditorium. District chorus. There are 20 students there's 20 students in the district chorus that qualified for districts. And for clubs, Kid to Kid has been running this week the Red Ribbon Week, which is to bring awareness for drug and violence protection. Students and staff have been addressed to dress in theme, which is today is Red Out, tomorrow's Crazy Sock Day, then there's Hawaiian Lei Day, Halloween attire, and Gray Out. They all have drug prevention themed names to get student encouragement. As well as the National Honor Society has welcomed in a new class of members this week, which will be inducted at their ceremony on November 14th. They also will be running their peer tutoring program, which will be paired with students to assist them in selected classes, which will be running through the next few weeks. The National World Language Honor Society also has their invitations, which were just sent out earlier this month. And over the next few months, students will meet the criteria for the following months in their induction in March. And Habitat for Humanity will be hosting a team pumpkin decorating contest on October 31st to celebrate Halloween.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your report. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Just one comment. Welcome. Good to see you here, and I really appreciate all the updates, especially all the happenings. And so it's good to get the visual on what's going on. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll also offer welcome on behalf of the board. Look forward to your reports every month. It's at this point where I'll welcome you to stay for the rest of the meeting, or as long as you want. But if you have other things to do tonight, you can be excused.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item is the approval of minutes from the October 14th, 2024 meeting. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Were there requests to comment? That wasn't.
Oh, my apologies. There are no requests to comment. Thank you, Dr. Whitney. Now moving on to the approval of minutes. We have a motion and a second. If there are no comments or questions on that, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Ms. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen, and thank you for the reminder, Dr. Whitney. Next item on the agenda is the district update. Dr. Campbell.
Yes, good evening again. I wanted to mention several meetings ago, the East Penn School Board approved a policy on the use of AI in education, and that particular policy guides the safe, effective, and responsible use of these tools and resources for students as part of the learning process. And we all recognize the power and the potential of these technologies, and we have placed an overview of this particular policy on our East Penn School District Family Tech Resource page that is available, again, if you go to the main district website under Family Resources. There is a link there that will take you directly to that AI policy and an overview of that. So we encourage families to please check that out. As was mentioned by our student representatives, tickets continue to be available for the EHS Theater Department's performance of Murder on the Orient Express. Again, that's held later this week into the weekend. Promises to be an outstanding show, and we encourage you to check out District High School website for more information. Seats can be reserved online. Tickets are also available at the door. We're really proud of our students from Emmaus High School FBLA, or Future Business Leaders of America. We have several juniors from that team who recently participated in the Lehigh Valley Youth Ethics and Leadership Training that was held last Thursday. The conference really was an engaging platform for our students to explore business ethics and further develop their leadership skills, and they certainly did an outstanding job representing Emmaus High School and our school community. I also wanted to congratulate the newest members of District 11 Hall of Fame. Specifically, really all of the inductees, but in particular, 3 of the individuals who are former East Penn students and or employees. Last Sunday, October 21st, there was a District 11 Hall of Fame inductee ceremony, and there we honored former Emmaus standout Shannon Williams, a softball player who was a graduate of the class of 2001. We also honored Keith Dorney, who was a member of the football, basketball, and track team from the class of 1975. And also inducted was former athletic director Dennis Ramella, who served as RAD for almost 19 years from 1999 to 2018. So congratulations to those three individuals really for the tremendous impact that they had not only on the East Penn community, but really on District 11 in terms of their outstanding accomplishments. As was also mentioned by Lindsay and Lexi, our SGA reps, we are incredibly proud of our fall sports teams, many of whom are continuing with their season. If you're interested in catching a sporting event, tomorrow night is the night for you. Girls soccer will be playing, boys soccer will be playing, girls volleyball will be playing, and field hockey are all playing tomorrow. So our EHS teams are continuing in district semifinals tomorrow. On Friday, football district quarterfinals will be happening here. And on Saturday, both our boys and girls cross-country teams have qualified for the state meet in Hershey. And I also want to recognize, in particular, it's been 23 years since both the boys and the girls team qualified as teams at the same time. So a huge shout out to our student athletes as well as Coach Reinhardt for that really tremendous accomplishment. And believe it or not, we're already thinking about the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. So I wanted to announce to our Golden Age card holders, we recently sent out an invitation for our annual Thanksgiving Day luncheon. It's being held on November 21st. We have 3 locations: Emmaus High School, Lower Macungie Middle School, Eyre Middle School. If you haven't received the invitation, please reach out to Laura Grow here at the administration building so that we can be sure that you are signed up. And we look forward to seeing our Golden Age card holders join us on November 21st. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Campbell. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Okay, well, thank you very much for the update. Next item on the agenda is personnel. There is one item to approve for personnel items. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, are there any questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Ms. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. I believe Dr. Campbell has some comments to make on what we just approved.
Yeah, this was a big one. So the board just accepted the resignation for the purpose of retirement for 6 incredibly dedicated employees, most of whom will retire at the end of this school year. But collectively, when we look at these 6 individuals, they have a total of 138 years of service in East Penn and 166 years in education. So certainly individuals who are incredibly dedicated to, first and foremost, really to our students, to be have a tremendous impact on the field of education. In particular, we have 2 individuals from Emmaus High School who will be retiring: Kelly Lesko, who's a math teacher, and Steve Yoder, who's a social studies teacher, was also our basketball coach for many years. From Eyre Middle School, we have the retirement of Doug Hunsiger, who's been a 6th grade teacher, and Heidi Rock, who is a science teacher at Eyre. We also have Steph Yoder, who's retiring. She's been a 1st grade teacher at Macungie Elementary School. And we also have a member of our facilities department, Mark Warden, who's our assistant facilities director, who will be retiring actually a little bit after the new year. So again, congratulations to those 6 individuals. Certainly appreciate your tremendous dedication to our students and to the East Penn community.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Campbell. Next on the agenda is business operations. If there are no objections, I'd like to take items A, B, and C together. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Ms. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Item D under business operations is an update on the K-8 realignment. Dr. Campbell, would you like to introduce?
Yes, I'm gonna switch places again. Okay, we are excited to be back. This evening, members of administration, as well as our partners from Breslin Architects, are here to provide the board and the community with an update on our work in the K-8 realignment. And I want to just start off by saying, as we emphasized in our initial presentation about a year ago, this work that we're about to discuss this evening is not simply about facilities. We see this as an opportunity to redefine, redesign, reimagine the programs that we offer students K-8, and also an opportunity for us to create learning spaces and facilities that are aligned to those programmatic needs. So specifically in terms of what we are here to provide an overview of this evening is we're going to start off by giving a very brief history of our work. We're then going to share an overview of the project schedules. In other words, when can the community expect to see some of these changes taking place? As well as project milestones. That's important for the board in terms of there will be milestones at which point you can expect public presentations and action from the board. And then finally, we're also going to give you a high-level overview of the work in which our teams have been engaged to plan for the K-8 programs, and we're also going to talk about next steps. This timeline, specifically if you look at some of the items that are indicated there, they should look very familiar to our board and to the community. Our work really with the K-8 realignment began in fall 2021 with the completion of a comprehensive feasibility study that included an analysis of demographic and enrollment trends and the condition and capacities of all district facilities. There were several needs that emerged from that initial study, and there were general options as to how we as a school community could move ahead to address those needs. We held listening sessions with internal and external stakeholders. We administered a community survey, shared the results of that community survey at a public meeting, and we formed teams to further refine the options that were originally proposed. If you look at the star that's indicated on that timeline, that indicates about last fall, October 2023, when we made a comprehensive presentation to the board and to the community that included 3 options. Shortly after that initial presentation, the board provided direction to develop the K-8 realignment plan. I just also want to mention, as we take a look at all of the work that I just briefly went over, available on the district website there is a facilities page that includes an archive of presentations, a timeline, overview of surveys, and things like that. So if there's anything that I mentioned that a community member or even one of our board members is saying, I don't recall that, again, we're happy to provide you with the archive of that information. There's been a lot of exciting work that has happened over the past year since October 2023. And tonight is really the first of several presentations that we have planned for the board and the community for this school year to provide you with an overview of the work. So before we go any further with our overview this evening, we want to really bring some definition or be sure that we have a common understanding of what we mean when we talk about this K-8 realignment plan. While most of us are familiar with what we mean, I wanted to define the changes specifically that are going to take place as part of this plan. So the realignment plan includes taking 5th grades out of our current elementary schools. This would create 7 elementary buildings with grades K to 4. And this also creates learning space or classroom space within all 7 of our elementary buildings across the district. The middle schools will be redesigned, and one of the buildings will house all of our 5th and 6th graders, and the other building will house all 7th and 8th graders. So again, when we talk about that K-8 realignment, it does involve changes at both the elementary as well as what is our current middle level system. And now, Steve Breslin, who is a familiar face to many of us, who represents Breslin Architects, will provide a high-level overview of the work that is involved at each of the middle school sites. And he's also then going to dive into the project timelines for these projects. I recognize that in particular, when we talk about the project timelines, this really will be the first time that the community is hearing the date on which we can expect all of these changes to take place. After Mr. Behrens from Breslin reviews some of the information regarding the project timelines, Jen Carolla, Director of Ed Alternatives in East Penn, will provide insight to the programmatic planning that has been well underway here in the district.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell, and thank you for this opportunity to be here again. I am Steve Behrens from Breslin Architects. With me tonight are two architects who have been working very diligently on this with me, Mark Buckaloo and Brian Huber. So as Dr. Campbell mentioned, we have been very busy over the past several months working on the plan, and in particular, we've met with the district administration about 6 times, and we've met with building level administrators twice. We've drawn up the floor plans of the existing 2 middle schools, and we've analyzed their existing capacity, and we've looked at the site conditions as well. And so that has been a diligent due diligence process that is unfolding. Where we move forward from here is finalizing the education specification. So what is involved in the 5-6 building and the 7-8 building with respect to their space plan and their program. I will note that you probably will recall from the feasibility study that there was conversation about a preliminary assignment of the buildings. And at that time, we were looking at, through our initial lens of the site, the building, the spaces that are available in each of those buildings. And we were thinking about Iyer as the 5-6 center and Lower Macungie as the 7-8 center. And as we've continued with this process and walked the buildings, looked at the spaces that are available, we are moving forward still with that as our understanding. Both of the buildings require significant work in terms of additions and renovations, so regardless of how that fleshes out, there will be substantial work. But we're looking to be guided by the principles that are at play that will be discussed a little bit later, and we're evaluating the buildings on that basis. So that being the case, we'll start by talking about Iyer. So it will require a classroom addition. So there's an expansion component to each of these buildings in terms of education space. Now, when we're talking about that, we're recognizing that that we need to be prepared with full justification on why this assignment is occurring. So we're going to be developing that and bringing that forth with the conclusion of the programming phase. So when we look at Iyer, we're anticipating the expansion of the building with respect to the classrooms. We're looking very carefully at a house concept. So as the building population grows, looking at a way to increase that student belonging and those guiding principles behind the project. And a grade level house concept is how we're envisioning this. And so the building could be set up with the addition to provide additional classroom space, but then the center core of the building being one where we could have those shared common spaces that are critical for the development of the successful floor plan. So we're also looking at the sites of each building. And so with Iyer, it's very clear that there's site circulation concerns. We're looking at potential, and right now, as part of the due diligence process, there are traffic analysis and traffic surveys on both campuses underway. And so we're looking at ways to manage the flow, the increased traffic that will occur, and so that's part of this evaluation as well. And of course, on the Ayer campus, there's 3 buildings to consider in that regard, and so we're looking at things like a loop road or something like that that will smooth the flow and increase the capacity on the campus. So as we look at Lower Macungie, we're also anticipating the need for a classroom addition. In that building, we're also looking at expansion and renovation of a cafeteria, a gymnasium addition. So again, looking at the building in terms of the increased needs in certain areas that a 7-8 program would involve, and identifying opportunities for expanding to accommodate those uses. And again, that's leading us at Lower Macungie to evaluate it on the 7-8 grade alignment. So looking at the site for Lower Macungie, we definitely have the opportunity there for some increased space for physical education, for athletics, and so we're again evaluating this campus as well in that regard. Now, in terms of the schedules, so we're very carefully looking at both of these projects, because it will be 2 projects, 2 substantial projects on 2 different sites and campuses. So for the purposes of this conversation, we're referring to them as Project 1 and Project 2. Now, again, that will be assigned based on the work that's needed at both and the relative scale of the projects and which would need to be started first in terms of its completion timeline. So here what you're seeing is Project 1. And these are high-level schedules that will show the phasing of the various design phases as well as the construction. So as you look at this schedule, you'll see there's some diamonds indicated there. Those are the board action timelines. So as Dr. Campbell mentioned, this is one of many presentations that will come before you to make sure that the board is well informed and has information available for well in advance of the need for board action items with respect to advancing the project to the next phase. So timelines of decision making in that regard. So when we look at the design phase, we're looking at where that first line, the pre-design, that's where we are now. So we're doing the evaluations that I've been describing. Then we would move into a schematic design phase. So once the building program is set, the educational specifications are developed and approved, then we would take that and start to look at it in terms of actual additions onto the buildings, space planning, design of the circulation and the site layout. So that's an important phase there for schematics. And then at the conclusion of that, we're in a position to begin the permitting process for the land development process, which will be unique to each site and a process that involves a lengthy discussions about all the stormwater management and zoning and those sorts of concerns relative to each specific site. Concurrent with that, we're starting the detailed design development phase. That's when each space is enlarged and looked at in great detail relative to unique spaces within the building for educational needs. And then we move into what's called the construction document phase. And that's where we're taking that design and developing very detailed drawings and specifications that are suitable for public bid of the project. So as you look at this schedule, you'll see that we're looking to complete that design phase in mid-2026, and then the project would be bid, and then construction would begin. So it is work on an occupied building in both cases, so we would have phased construction. And typically, the first phase of construction involves the building additions, so that when they're complete, that creates swing space to move students into those areas of the building and then be able to renovate the portions of the existing building. We would be thinking very carefully as that design develops with respect to summer work versus school year work? How do we maintain safety on the campuses? And each of those phases would include careful evaluation of site circulation, of egress in and out of the building, all those sorts of things forthcoming and part of future presentations. The next slide, which refers to Project 2, so you'll notice that the two phases identified in green as pre-design and schematic design, those would be concurrent. So those are the processes that unfold here in the next 6 to 8 months. And then once those are complete, because again, one of the guiding principles of the projects are equity. So we're evaluating these buildings together, evaluating how the entire student population of the district for those grades will have an equitable and consistent experience in the building. And so those will occur concurrently. And then there'd be a gap of about 2 months before the land development and design development phases of the second project would begin. That's because with respect to the design team as well as the district administration, we need to make sure that we're allowing time for proper decision-making relative to the individual aspects of each project. And so they'd be slightly out of phase to allow for proper time and attention to the specifics of each project. And then again, that would develop as I described earlier with respect to a detailed design phase, then moving into a construction document phase and bidding. And then again, we anticipate a phased construction duration of about 2 years, again, in this case. And so there is the opportunity with some of those final interior renovations to occur on the second project subsequent to the first project. But as you'll see, we're aiming in both cases for the fall of 2028 to institute that grade realignment, obviously occupying both of these completed projects simultaneously for that grade realignment to occur. Now, in near term, the next slide is a enlargement of essentially those concurrent programming and schematic design phases. So you'll see some additional line items to flesh this out a little bit. You'll again see those diamonds indicating on this slide, it refers to major presentations that would occur as well as board action items. So we would be anticipating at the completion of the ed specs and the building program to be coming back with a presentation relative to that. And we would anticipate some of that due diligence information to be completed and coming in with respect to traffic studies, with respect to preliminary stormwater evaluation, some of those site fundamental decisions that are so important to begin the permitting process. We also anticipate during this timeline to be developing a proposal and receiving proposals and doing interviews for the construction manager. So that's an important member of the team that comes to the table at the conclusion of the programming and the commencement of the schematic design phase, because at that point we'll be interested in having their input with regard to phasing and constructability and cost estimating. And so that we anticipate to occur in the December and January timeline. And then we would move into that schematic design phase where each project 1 and 2, would be fleshed out with respect to a conceptual design, building floor plans, site layouts, even some three-dimensional views of potential designs. And then that would then lead us up to the completion in April timeline of that schematic design. And that would be the next major board action that you would review that. We'd have presentations leading up to it to bring that before you as the initial phase of design. So at this point, I'll turn it over.
Good evening.
As Mr. Barron said and offered insight into the redesign of the physical space, Dr. Campbell alluded to the fact that there is so much more to this project just that beyond the physical. And so as our branding indicates, we are aiming to redefine, redesign, and reimagine K-8 education in the East Penn School District. And it is an incredible opportunity to be able to do that, especially with the assistance of the stakeholders that we have involved in this process. And so what you see in front of you on this slide is an indication that the 12 smaller boxes are 12 different subcommittees. We have 10 that have currently launched since the beginning of this year, this calendar year. So in January, 10 of these 12 launched. The 2 at the bottom are future phase committees, and that will they'll lend themselves to the work once we actually get into the design of the spaces. Right now, this is representative of about 130 K through 12 faculty and staff here in the district. Some faculty and staff do sit on multiple committees, and it's staff, faculty, as well as leadership representation. These subcommittees have an overarching steering committee, which is located at the top of this slide. The steering committee is comprised of 2 to 3 leads for each of the subcommittees. So the way that this works is the subcommittees work together, they flesh out recommendations, the leads of those subcommittees respond to inquiry from our steering committee, and that's the decision-making group of this project. Each committee looks at decisions and recommendations through a very specific lens. So as you get into the nitty-gritty of what each of these committees represents, you'll see it is a very comprehensive approach to planning, and we really are looking to educate whole child. This gives us an opportunity not just to vision out what the future can look like, but also to be evaluative of our current structures and existing practices in the district. So it's not just a matter of adding on and continuing to do more, but it's really evaluating are our current structures giving us the outcomes on a consistent basis that we're looking for. When we first started with our steering committee and the subcommittees, we wanted a way to bring consensus to the groups and to the conversations that we were having. So we developed these 4 guiding principles or questions. In the quadrants in front of us, you'll see that the priorities we have identified for this project include opportunities, equity, academics, and finances. If you recall, probably about 18 months ago, we did a community survey, and some of these same priorities emerged from our community members in the responses to the questions on that survey. From the priorities, we drilled down a little bit further to develop questions that we wanted to put to the test when we were decision making. So you'll see a highlight and emphasis on equitable opportunities, inclusivity, maintaining high expectations, visioning the future of education, and last but certainly not least, financial feasibility and sustainability of the things that we put into place. This has been really helpful, not only for our steering committee, but also for our subcommittees. As we encounter discourse and really meaningful conversation regarding next steps in decision-making, we continue to go back to the lens of these 4 quadrants to make sure that we are cohesive in the consensus that we built from the beginning. The programmatic planning, as indicated, started earlier this calendar year. So since January, our steering committee has met 5 times. In between those meetings, the subcommittees are convening. As Mr. Behrens indicated, the educational specifications is really the place that we're at right now. So what that includes is recommendations that started in our subcommittees, moved to our steering committee, went through a smaller committee of our administrators in the middle school buildings, and now Dr. Campbell and I will compile all of that to turn over to Breslin Architects regarding the ed specs for these 2 buildings that we are looking to create in terms of programming. The educational programming conversations that we are having right now are more high level, and we'll look forward to another presentation later this year to be able to present in much greater detail programming conversations, but these things include bell schedules, interventions, extracurricular activities, academic programs. What's neat is because we have the different lenses of all of the different subcommittees, we all may be talking about the same topic or theme, but coming at it from a different approach, which makes the conversation at the steering level very robust in order to make sure that all facets of every decision are considered. And last but certainly not least, highlighted on this slide, is the opportunity to engage with our community stakeholder focus groups. Dr. Campbell and I were able to facilitate those groups. They kicked off last week, they launched. We have 4 focus groups. 3 of them launched last week, a 5-6, a 7-8, a K-8 group, and then after the new year, we'll bring our K-4 group together. We had approximately 110 community members express interest in being a part of that, and we did welcome every member who was interested to participate. So we had great turnout last week. Last week, the intent behind the meetings was to really just set the stage to bring everybody up to speed, but moving forward, we intend to meet with these groups twice this school year and really inform them about the work and the conversations that are happening within our subcommittees, ask them for their feedback, and then respond to our committees with the community feedback. So I think we have some really great representation. Attendance was great, and we're excited to partner with our community in addition to the stakeholders that we already have involved in this process.
So where are we going from here? So in terms of next steps, some very important items on the horizon. The items that are in bold there are items that would involve board action. So the first is, as I discussed a little bit a moment ago, appointing the construction manager here in the coming months. And again, that is an important team member to bring to the table so that at that critical transition between programming and schematic design is the ideal time to bring them on board so that they're seeing the development of the building project itself from conception. And in parallel with that, we're working on the educational programming and the presentation of that. And then along with that, and with the input of the construction manager and the design team, bringing forward some updated financial picture on the project as well. Then the next time we'd be looking forward to an approval of schematic design, and that's again as mentioned here as spring on the milestone schedule. It's the April timeline, and again bringing a developed specific schematic design concept for each of the buildings that incorporates all of this information we've been describing to you, and makes that an actionable project that would be presented along with phasing, along with cost estimates and financing. And then in the midst of this, we're keeping in mind future facility considerations. So we haven't lost track or forgotten about the high school needs, about the K-4 elementary school needs. So we know there's a district-wide capital plan. In fact, as a design team, we're going to be sitting down with the district administrators to review that in a few weeks so that we know that what we're doing with regard to these specific projects is part of the holistic picture of the capital needs of the district as a whole, so that it's all hand in glove coming together. So, all right. So with that, we're happy to open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you for that overview. As Mr. Barron said, we'll open up to questions. Dr. Whitney.
Yeah, just a couple quick questions. One, for the subcommittees, are they being given a sort of common charge or a common process and procedure for considering their specific area? Or is it really those guiding questions that they've all been given, or what is their charge?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate that. At the beginning of our work, we identified some priority items for each committee to work on. But to be very honest, that shifted slightly once we spoke with Breslin and had the timeline for the educational specifications. So for the past few months, those committees have been very focused on what would the physical space look like through their specific lens. So the SEL committee is thinking about how would we build community and inclusivity in terms of physical space. The MTSS SEL intervention group is talking about what would intervention spaces look like for the students that we're serving, or enrichment spaces look like. So all of that has been the charge for the past few months. And once we get this part of the process turned in, the next step will be to really talk about again, programming, very specific to programming, and building the culture of these buildings. And from each of those lenses, what would it look like?
Okay, great, thank you. And then just one other quick question. Maybe you said this and I missed it. The stakeholder focus groups, are those invited, open to all who shows up to those?
We did put out the invitation to anybody who chose to participate in the community, whether it were current parents, senior citizens, community members, anybody with a vested interest living in the community could participate. So that was open to all. Everybody who responded received a personal invitation then to come to that meeting. So those are closed meetings at this point in time. We still would welcome anybody who has a vested interest and would choose to participate. They could just reach out and we could connect them to the appropriate committee.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I had two things quickly, for now at least. Going back a year, I was taking a look at the timeline. The presentation from a year ago, at that point, had the tentative start of the realignment with the start in September of 2027. And from the presentation today, it looks like that has been pushed back a year. I was hoping you could speak to the particulars of why it's been shifted back a year.
That it really related to the elapsed time between then and now. And so just going through this this deliberate process and engaging these groups has, you'll see some of the other components of that schedule had us starting the process earlier. So it's really just how the deliberate decision process came together and where we are now evaluating moving forward.
So I guess as a follow-up to that, and I know you're going to go into more specific financials and update that picture later in the winter. I guess my question is, with pushing it back a year, is that from preliminary, I know we're not getting into the weeds of the financials yet, are we setting ourselves up to have, a bigger financial impact by pushing it back a year than we would have if we had kept the original timeline?
Yeah, good question. So there was some acknowledgement in those original estimates via contingency and so forth. There was conversation at that time about, are we representing this as today's dollars, or are we representing this as the future inflated dollars? And so we did, of course, nobody has a crystal ball, but we did include some contingency in those numbers to anticipate some escalation. But again, when in the next phase of work, that would be all evaluated again. And at the end of the day, we do need to hold to the budget as determined by and set by the board to govern these projects.
Right, and that budget part that you're talking about, I think, is going to be critically important going forward in terms of timing, because while we may not be in inflationary environment that we were a year ago, I mean, prices are not getting cheaper. You know, they are going to be, they're going to continue to go up. So if we have those contingencies built in, that's going to be helpful. But I hear what you're saying about the deliberate nature of establishing the stakeholders and forming the committees and the necessary nature of those things. However, we haven't really jumped too deep into the project just yet, and we're already, pushing back the original timelines, which is, I hope it's not something that we're going to continue to see a lot of. I know building projects, it's just part of the game, but I'm hoping that with the need to stay inside of the budget that we had set out, coupled with the needs of the budgets that we haven't even talked about yet for other projects, that we're able to do our very best to stick to the timeline that we originally had laid out. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Jankowski?
So I'm going to continue down this path that Mr. Smith opened. I guess I'm still confused why it took a year to get to today. You know, when we had approved this a year ago, I thought we were in a position where we kind of had the plans already. You know, there were building schematics, additions that were laid out, discussions of classrooms, the other gym, the other cafeteria. And it is concerning that we're now a year later and now we don't have clear architectural depictions. I don't view this year delay as a contingency because, you know, along the lines of what Mr. Smith said, the construction costs, material costs have increased tremendously since last year. And that's just going to continue going, whether it's 3% or more. So at this stage, I'd like to see a budget again to make sure what we're looking at here, and a clear understanding of timeline, because I'm not comfortable right now that we're going to hit 28 at this stage. You know, even looking at next steps, you know, why is it taking us to the winter of 25 to appoint a construction manager? Why wasn't this already being developed once we approved it last fall? It just seems like this is in quicksand, and I'd like to see more of a plan that will ensure to us and give us the comfort as a board when this is going to get done. You know, obviously, yeah, you're going to run into issues, but I don't know. I'm really bothered by the fact that it took us a year to get to here. I mean, it was basically radio silence once we approved it last fall, and I expected a lot of this stuff to already be well on its way. And again, I think this board needs to see another budget because we approved it at one point. And, I mean, who knows what these costs are? And again, I don't see that as a contingency. I see that as we've got to redo the budget because we're at a different point now.
I'll address a few of the concerns that you just mentioned. As we clearly stated, it is our intention to bring forward updated financials to the board. That is planned for later this year. We're saying winter 2025. We anticipate perhaps like February timeline. The other piece I want to say in terms of a perception that it took us a long time to get to where we are today. I think the goal for this evening really was to show you the work that, remember, the board took action in November of 2023. And in between that time, we developed an agreement and partnered with Breslin Architects. That was certainly a process that took some time. I will say time well worth it when you think about the fact that Steve Behrens and his team stand before us now as partners along a multi-year journey. So certainly that is a process that, again, it takes time to be sure that we have the right partners to accompany us on this journey. The other piece is, so if the board took action on or around November, in January, you heard how from a programmatic conceptual planning now, that work started in the district. That was what we provided you with a high-level overview of, you know, the work of over 10 committees that have happened now for several months. I will also mention, and again, certainly I'll allow our expert architect to maybe speak more to this, but I also want to emphasize that a year ago when our architect stood before you and shared an overview of I'm going to say the conceptual changes to the physical site of two buildings, it really was just that. I hope you can appreciate that early on in the process. It would be atypical for our architects to actually delve into how many classrooms do we need, where would we put them, what would be the size of those classrooms, and actually go through that design, the actual design phase for the purpose of for the presentation last year. Again, because it was very much a conceptual, what building might be the 5.6, what building might be the 5.7, what do we imagine as part of the high level changes that will need to happen to those buildings to be able to make them happen. So I say that not at all as an excuse, but really just the facts as to what have you all been doing since for about a year now. I think that was really the goal, to hopefully show you there has been a substantive amount of work that has happened. Certainly, it's not above the surface, right? A lot of that work has been happening, I'm going to say, behind the scenes, but with many, many internal and external stakeholders who have been a part of this process planning. Steve, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add about like the reason for maybe the work that you did last year as compared to the work you're doing now.
Yes, I can speak to that. So in the feasibility study phase, it was about making the assessment of the existing buildings and then doing some rough calculations relative to how many students might be engaged with these buildings if this moves forward. So it was a very high level, I'll call it a quantitative analysis, maybe is the best way to say it. What we've been doing since then, once we've been brought on board, because at that time we were only engaged for the feasibility study. So we were not engaged, and there was an interview process and an agreement developed and that sort of thing after that board direction. So now what we're engaged in is what I'll call the qualitative aspect of it, where this is a major change in terms of the grade realignment and its impact, and it's going to be very fruitful in a lot of great ways, but it's a significant change. And in our experience, whenever a district goes down this road, yes, it's a very careful, deliberate process with a lot of conversations about how does the building need to be programmed. And so I can tell you from being part of this process at multiple times that this is time well spent in terms of developing that, because until we're handed a space program and an educational specification that we can then start looking at individual spaces and adjacencies of them. It's one thing to say, oh, we need this many classrooms and this many related arts and these learning support spaces. Well, what's the arrangement of those? How do they mesh together? And so it is a detailed process. And it may not have been the original timeline that was planned, but I can certainly see how the time was well invested. And as somebody who's observed this process many times, I can tell you that it's been moving forward in a very fruitful way. So,
Ms. Bowman?
Yes, thank you. A couple comments that you don't necessarily need to respond to, and then some clarifying questions. I remember when this came up for vote last year, and there was a lot of pressure on the board members who were here who were not on that committee to digest a lot of information very, very quickly. Most of it not presented to the public outside of session. And when we would ask about maybe slowing this down, it was said to us that we need to stick to this schedule. And I didn't really understand even then or now the importance of sticking to the schedule that strictly when several of us were really struggling to really digest all of the stuff that was being thrown at us. So it is a little bit frustrating to have spent so much time trying to prepare for a vote for that one meeting, and then to a year later find out the project's a year behind schedule when we were really pushed to get ready for that meeting and not delay it by a month so that we could wrap our minds around this project. That said, this is all water under the bridge, and we're moving forward, not discussing the past. But so I did have a couple clarifying questions. During the presentation, you mentioned classroom in the singular. I'm sorry, I don't know if, and I think you were just saying it as we're adding, is it just one classroom, or it's just that we don't know the number of classrooms that we're adding?
With respect to the additions to each building based on the needs for the capacity?
Yes.
Yes, that's something that is being developed. So we're analyzing those. Part of this process is to analyze the capacities of the existing buildings. That's what we've done. Met with the building principals, walked the building, seen how each and every space is being utilized. Again, not something that was done for a feasibility study. And then understanding, next step is with the building program, understanding how those existing spaces will be used, how buildings that were designed years ago with different programming needs, how they can be developed into these current needs. So yes, ultimately the number of spaces that are added to the building is more than just simply looking at the capacity of the building and, here's a classroom, 24 students, and multiply it. There's other considerations relative to learning support, to related arts. So maybe it turns out that the classrooms in the building are sufficient, and we need to add on to the building for more specialized spaces that the existing building can't support. So that's again, that's a time-consuming exercise to go through. But when we enter into the schematic design phase and start drawing this, we need to have that complete so we know that we have a solid outline. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, you just kept saying classroom in the singular, so it made it sound like you were adding one classroom in
Oh,
each school.
okay, right.
And I assumed
Yeah,
that's not the
yeah,
case,
sorry.
but I would.
Really, I meant, I should have said classroom wing.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, that
yeah,
makes more
okay,
sense.
thanks.
Okay, that's helpful. The other comment that I have is, so there are several people here who were on a committee who have the benefit of a lot of the theoretical information behind like why certain things are happening. And then there's others who were not on that committee but who were sitting on the board a year ago who have a little bit of information about that. And then there's 3 people on this board who were not on the board at all and missed that whole presentation. And so I'm hoping when you approach this schematic design, there is more of a presentation about why we need some of these things that go, especially the ones that go beyond accommodating space for students. For example, the second gym, the cinder track. I'm sure there's other examples, but there's things that some of these board members are privy to that the rest of us aren't. And without understanding the reason that we're including these, they sound like big extra costs. I mean, that's kind of what it sounds like to me right now, but that's because it hasn't been explained to me. So I'm hoping that's part of the presentation before we vote on that. I think those are the only 2 questions that I have.
Can I add on to that?
Sure, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Just in that sense, if it would be helpful, and I don't know if this is possible, to have maybe a recording of like even just this presentation so that we, if I did have a question, I could look it up prior or ask it in advance. So if had we had the PowerPoint with the presentation prior to the meeting, and then we could have the discussion. I don't know if that's a possibility, but that would have been helpful for me.
Okay.
Are you referring to
Like
can you just, the
like
recording?
if Steve would have been able to present that to us with the PowerPoint ahead of time, so we could hear it prior to the meeting. The questions being posed ahead of time, it would have been helpful for that, or to look up certain aspects.
Okay. I thought you were referencing previous presentations, and I just wanted
No.
to clarify that
No,
they
no.
are absolutely available.
Ms. Ford?
Thank you. Well, first, I just wanted to say thank you for clarifying, Mr. Behrens and Dr. Campbell. I'm one of those people who wasn't here prior to, and so yes, it leaves a lot of questions. I guess my question was, I was looking on the presentation and you had built in the diamonds for, give you a second. You had built in the diamonds on the presentation for times we'd be updated. And my question is, when that happens, will we have enough background information to make, solid decisions? Because I see it's built in now, but I'm just gathering from the conversation tonight, maybe that wasn't done. So is that something that's being done to help keep us in the loop a little better?
Yes, that was the intent of having them identified. So again, there would be a process that would bring, leading up to those critical milestone approval requests, that there would be presentations that would show the advancement of the design leading up to each of those milestones. And those are the points at which the cost estimates are updated, the design is updated. There'll be very sophisticated visuals, renderings, animations, and so you'll have a very clear sense of where the design is going, and then prior to making those decisions. Because that's important, because through that action, then you're authorizing the continuation. We're moving into the next phase. And so we need to make sure you have everything you need in advance of that to make an informed decision.
Thank you. And the other is just a comment in general. In the community, this is a hot topic. And so I can't help but think, as a board member or as board members, there's community pressures because people are a little nervous about the change because they also don't have a lot of details. So that in turn makes us feel a little anxious to make sure we have enough information so that we can satisfy community members when they ask the questions. So just a little disclaimer there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ford. Dr. Whitney?
Yeah, can you go back to slide 11, the upcoming milestones slide, please? Yeah, I just want to clarify something. So this is it says November 13th. There's a diamond. Final building program, and I'm sorry if you explained this as you were going through the presentation, I missed it. Well, November 13th, I think our next meeting is November 11th. I assume that date's supposed to be our next meeting. What exactly is that, and what are we getting in 2 weeks' time that is a final building program? Is that a vote? Is that action we're taking? Is that simply presentation? Can you please clarify that?
So as I mentioned, the diamonds on this slide represent significant presentations as well as board action. So we're not anticipating an approval or board action relative to the building program itself. That's not typically done. But yes, it would be a substantial information session with respect to what the conclusions of these committee development has been, so that we can understand what the building program is relative to these two projects. So again, when we talk building program, we're talking about what spaces are in the building, how many classrooms, what are the learning support spaces, what are the related arts, do we need another gym? If so, why? What's the justification for that? So that's what we're working towards with that timeline there.
Okay, so all of the subcommittees and the steering committee have, in 2 weeks, they will have coalesced around a series of recommendations and a plan for the full program of both of these buildings. Is that correct?
Now I'm going to go to another slide.
Sure.
Now, what is happening within the next several weeks, when Mr. Behrens refers to that building program, that's really what we refer to as our educational specifications. So that actually really is about what will the spaces, what are some of the core spaces that we'll need, about how many classrooms, not getting into the nitty-gritty in terms of, and what's going to be in those classrooms, how large will they be, what are students designing, what are students learning in those classrooms. So that particular piece is a milestone that's more for us internally. As a board, you will see that when you then look at schematic designs. And that's the architect is going to take the information that we deliver within the next several weeks, and they're going to be working with that over several months to actually now start to design those spaces. And that's what we will bring to you in the spring, and you'll actually take a look at those schematics. That gives us several months from the time the educational specifications are submitted to the architect for them to then design those spaces. They'll come back, because we're also planning to take that to our committees will take a final look at that as well. Our stakeholder groups with the community will also take a look at that so that we can really vet that information before bringing it to the board for review.
Okay, so the November in 2 weeks is a presentation?
Not a board action
Is not
item.
a presentation?
Correct.
Is or is not a
It
presentation?
is not a presentation.
Okay, so, okay. Thank you for clarifying.
So really, the presentations are this evening, which is intended to share with you the work that has happened so far, and really to lay out what the board can expect over the next school year. The next time we will come back to you will be, we're saying mid to late winter, at which time we will bring you an overview of that educational program. You heard Jen speak to what do we mean by program? What will the courses be? What will the basic schedule be? What do we envision for SEL? How will interventions be delivered? What are those extracurriculars and or athletics? The programming piece is coming first, and then that final schematic design will follow later in the spring. Those are the next two milestones or touch points for the board.
Okay, thank you. That
Slides
helps.
9 and 10, which depict the board approvals, are the ones that we should be focused
Correct.
on for our
Yes.
purposes.
Okay, Mr. Smith?
Yeah, and just for clarity's sake, on my part, my line of questioning about the timeline, and though I do really appreciate some of my colleagues' questions about making sure that the whole board is informed, and being sensitive to the needs of the time it takes to digest all the information, whether that's sending out updates in between board meetings rather than our typical packet, whatever it might be. I wouldn't want our need to digest information hold up a particular timeline. Nor was my line of questioning meant to be seen as critical of the team of people that we have in all of those subcommittees on the steering committee and the professionals we have we're going to be working with alongside in this project. I believe that every single person's in the right seat on that bus and we're going forward in the right direction. My concern is in the shifting of the timeline. There's a couple problems with that, but the number one thing that really seems to sit in my mind is that there are young families that a year ago were kind of like playing out the math in the back of the napkin and saying, okay, when is my son or daughter going to be hitting one of these transitions? And okay, they wrap their mind around that conceptually, and then okay, now we're a year later, and so that's going to take another shift in that. Also, you have really young families who are debating whether to hold their kid back a year, maybe send them to kindergarten next year versus this year, if they can swing that, to maybe make those transitions that are going to have to happen. Maybe they are a little bit more spread out rather than having one this year, then now I got to do one the next year, depending on how the timeline plays out. So if there are going to be necessary delays in construction projects, it seems to be part of the game. If there are necessary delays, I wouldn't love to have them. I just want to make sure that we're being clear as to why they're necessary. Something we may have set out to take a year, go through a certain stage. Governmental red tape gets in the way, whether it's approval from the state or whatever it might be, and now it takes a year and a half to get there. Whatever that is, like, we can go into that with open eyes and open mind about what it's going to look like. I just don't want to have any of our presentations lead the board, but more so the community in a way where they can say, okay, by this date, this is going to happen, and this is what I need to prepare for, only to have that change. So that was my line of questioning there. Just wanting to consider that as we move forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
I have a response to that, not that, and I appreciate that it wasn't necessarily a question, but I will say I think you really captured what we saw as the real value of tonight's presentation in terms of, again, having now officially partnered with an architect who has provided detailed timelines in terms of these are the phases of a multi-site renovation and or construction process. We now have received those finalized timelines. So I do look at this is something not conceptual as it was a year ago, but concrete and substantive upon which we can now all take that step forward together. I agree with you that the big takeaway is we are now set for the K-8 realignment to go into effect for the 28-29 school year, so August of 2028. And when Jen and I facilitated our stakeholder meetings last week, that was very much the purpose of those meetings. It was also to set the context for what is our work going to look like together as a team over this year. You tonight also saw over the next several years how often we're going to continue to keep the board updated. Being very mindful of the fact that there are big decisions to be made and not wanting anyone to feel as if you're not coming along with us on this journey. When we met with our stakeholder groups, Mr. Smith, you're absolutely right. That's what we all do as parents. August of 2028, you saw some people go, okay, that means my fifth grader is going to finish out in elementary school, right? Okay, that means this child's going to be there. We had students who have children who are not yet enrolled in our schools who said, oh, my child's going to be in third grade in that year. And so I think that's really a big takeaway as well for our community. And that is a timeline which now, again, has like expert work behind it to say this is a reasonable timeline for us.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bowman?
Yeah, just a question I forgot to ask, and I'm more asking for the community because I know it's something that we've been asked, various board members have been asked, and it wasn't brought up here. When does the district plan to nail down what the redistricting portion of this is going to look like?
Appreciate you asking the question. I will also say that we anticipate, our redistricting committee has begun meeting. We anticipate that certainly as we now move throughout the spring that we will look more carefully at redistricting that will be, I'm going to say, essential for the district to do, particularly at the elementary level as we look closely at those enrollment projections so that we can see in which sending areas is there an anticipated growth that potentially exceeds the capacity in those elementary schools, even with fifth grade moved out, and very strategically taking a look at several options to address what we might refer to as those particular hotspots. I will also publicly say, again, we've said this at our stakeholder meetings last week, that when we reflect on our work a year ago, we really wanted to give a comprehensive plan and looking at various options. And I know that our demographers really did an awesome job in terms of trying to get as specific as possible. About a year ago, knowing where we were in the conceptual planning, there was mention in the public presentation of specific developments at the elementary level that we might look at redistricting. As a parent, as a community member, I get the fact that it's very natural to say, oh boy, that's my development and I have concerns about that. And so we apologize for perhaps being, I'm going to say, premature in actually publicly naming developments because those decisions have not yet been made. We really need to take a look at, is there an absolute need supported by data and information about enrollment and demographics that would that would necessitate movement. And similar to what we've done before in this organization when I was a part of redistricting, typically you can look at different ways or multiple options of how we might address those particular needs in specific places, and actually, again, hear from stakeholders who were involved in that process so that whatever decision we're making, we feel as if it's been really informed. And I just wanted to say again, what was proposed a year ago, I think, very well intended to say that we've really done our investigative homework, but I think a little bit premature.
Yeah, I understand that. When do you feel
Later
like-
this year, as we begin that redistricting work, we will certainly keep the community updated as well. I would say we just recently received updated demographics, and now as we look to the spring, that's a logical time for us to begin looking at the redistricting piece.
Thank you. And while I'm asking when we had this initial presentation last year, I think it was said that there would be a follow-up one that coming January about the high school, which never happened. Has that been punted? Like, is it on pause? Like, what's going on with that?
I will say that it's certainly a topic that we have discussed. You heard Mr. Barron's reference the fact that the high school, we recognize people are saying, community members are saying, what about the high school? Again, I invite Steve to give his expertise as well, because he looks at things through a lens that we in education perhaps don't always. I will say, given where we are at right now with this project, from an administrative standpoint, in terms of the resources that we currently have dedicated throughout this organization to supporting the programmatic planning, from the management in terms of the fact that we will have 2 large facilities projects happening at 2 different locations in our school district, and from a financial planning piece in terms of, you heard us talk about bringing updated financials. I think Mr. Barron's made a really great point in terms of, we clearly appreciate that the board set a budget for this project, right? So we're not unrealistic, but with updated financials for all those reasons, I think a reasonable time for us to consider the high school would be at least perhaps a year or further down the road, once we have more concrete information regarding those financials. And again, also looking at all the resources over the next several years that are really going to be dedicated. So I think we need to really take a bigger step into this project before we can say, yeah, we have the capacity to now think about. Steve, anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's well said. So from a capacity of, just like we're putting these 2 projects slightly out of phase, because we need to be able to evaluate in detail a lot of individual spaces and so forth. We need to have that phase between where once these are, because ultimately we won't know what this costs until bid day. Right? So it really makes sense to watch some of those financial elements come into play. And then, yes, we certainly need to be well in advance of when we want to phase the construction with the design phase. But again, yes, I would agree that that's probably a year or more down the road from where we stand today.
That's helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay. Any additional comments? Okay, well, I'm just going to close by, again, thanking the team for the presentation and for this update. I certainly appreciate the work that's been done over the last year. Certainly on the programmatic side, understanding what we're going to try and do with these changes. Certainly that collective work has advanced the plans. So, I don't necessarily see the last year as putting us behind, and I certainly do buy into the idea that, we'd much rather do it right and be deliberate with it. But I will, in deference to some comments that were made here, we do need to understand the impacts, what this means in terms of additional costs or other considerations for implementing the project. And looking back on what we approved about a year ago, I did understand that that was a conceptual plan and likely meant, that those timetables did have an assumption as to when potentially to pull the trigger. But again, because of the considerations and just the way things enveloped, I'm not surprised that this has been pushed out. But again, I appreciate the comment, time well spent in order to getting this right and be deliberative about it. Okay. Again, thank you for your time and look forward to the successive updates that I'm sure we're going to get. Okay, moving on the agenda. Under curriculum, there are 2 items for approval. If there's no, if there are no objections, I'd like to take items A and B together. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? Okay, I guess before we take a vote, I will just mention that item B is the approval of the new high school course curricula that we had presented at the last meeting, and echo the consensus viewpoint that this is they're exciting offerings and looking forward to getting those implemented. Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mr. Jankowski.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Dr. Whitney.
Aye.
Ms. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Falegi.
Aye.
Ms. Ford.
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Item C under curriculum is a presentation on the Emmaus High School 25-26 Program of Studies. Dr. Campbell, would you like to introduce?
Yes, joining us this evening, we're very appreciative of Beth Gariello, principal of Emmaus High School. I know that she has Lori Gamble, one of our assistant principals, who does a tremendous amount of work. I'm going to say pulling together, working with the administrative team and our teaching staff at the high school, pulling together a significant amount of information that's reflected in the program of studies. I'm sure the board, like me, like our community members, just looks at the breadth of opportunities in terms of course offerings that we have for our students at Emmaus High School, and just continue to be very proud of the work of the high school team and really the opportunities we're able to offer our students. So Beth, I'll allow you to provide an overview of the program of studies. I think you're going to specifically focus on changes from the previous guide.
Yes, thank you very much. Dr. Campbell is correct. We are very proud of the work being done at the high school. And you'll notice in these changes, the focus really was increased accessibility for students to access, different courses, and more student choice and more flexibility in their schedules, while maintaining or raising academic expectations. So I know you all have the Program of Studies summary of changes. Some of the changes are really just clerical in terms of the dates or updating letters, things like that. But I'm just going to briefly go through everything and explain where we are. So at the start, this is in the order of the Program of Studies. We updated the letter that I submit at the beginning. Obviously, you can see I've just added a new letter. And then we felt it was very important at the beginning part of the Program of Studies to add a component emphasizing the importance of attendance. As you know, we have an attendance campaign here in the district this year, and we have been sharing that on our social media, on our communications home, on posters throughout the building, and we felt it was very important to also add a statement about attendance, including a link to our attendance expectations. So that's new. We did not have that in years past. We wanted to make sure that there was information there and links accessible for parents. The next thing that we updated was the Act 158, which is our graduation pathways put out by the state. We had two things in our previous program of studies. We had the words explaining Act 158 and then the state's flow chart. After speaking to a lot of parents at our engagement evenings or parent advisory meetings and going over this at every start to school year open house, the flow chart really makes a whole lot of sense and the words were just extraneous, kind of redundant. And so we removed a lot of the words and are keeping the state created flow chart that explains the options. And of course, all that work is being supported by our counselors and our teachers, and so the students get a lot of information on Act 158 as well. So we just removed the words and added kept the flow chart instead. All right, and then for prerequisites and overrides, we changed the date from March 30th. We changed the wording to the end of March. We pulled out under semesters explaining our schedule. Instead of saying the 24-25 school year, we explained the AB block without attaching dates to it. The schedule's officially in place. We don't anticipate any changes in our schedule, so there is no need to qualify the year. Specialized programs, we're actually increasing credit by exam with Westchester University, our dual credit or dual enrollment process. Westchester has been kind enough to increase or expand their program to allow 10th graders to take dual enrollment classes. So you can see that we changed from 11th grade to 10th grade. And we've taken the year out, so hopefully we don't have to keep updating the year every year in the program of studies. We are pleased to say that Westchester is not anticipating a change in their fee for dual enrollment classes, so we kept that fee in. Obviously, we would update that from year to year as that changes. Field study, we had to clarify, parking's a big deal at the high school. And so we needed to add a statement about parking to the field study program and the DCO program, just stating that the student is responsible for their own transportation and they are not guaranteed a parking spot by participating in this program. Our diversified career occupations is run through LCTI, and we just needed to clarify some times in there. Students were trying to leave at different times during the day. We needed to add the dismissal time for our DCO students and the fact that they need to have a job. So this DCO is a program where they work and they are supervised through LCTI. It's a phenomenal real-life work experience. And then they also have to meet with the LCTI coordinator of this program weekly. We had some students this year that, for whatever reason, no longer had an employment, and it took a long time for them to get another job. And so we are trying to tighten up that time frame so they don't miss that much time in the workforce. And again, we added the transportation and parking caveat. We have updated the Jasper flyer, which is our project-based curriculum, and we have changed the designations in the Jasper courses to align with our other on-level courses throughout the school. So we adjusted the coding and the course titles to match the corresponding level coding throughout the rest of the building. For the SAT, we just clarified some of the words, some of the language there. And then the next thing is we are pulling out a description of consultative push-in supports through our special ed services. We no longer are offering consultative push-in support services because we've reallocated our special ed teachers and we've added more reading labs and math labs, and we've put the special ed teachers into those as support and lead teachers. And so we are no longer pushing in and into multiple classes at the same time frame. Moving into the course descriptions per department, the art department wanted to add a flow chart, so we added that to help families better understand the progression. In our entrepreneurship in our business department, we added a focus on public speaking, and the teacher of this course or teachers of this course are actually modeling and following our Future Business Leaders of America expectations, which are pretty high expectations. And so the public speaking, communication, teamwork skills are being brought into these courses at a little bit higher level based on FBLA expectations. We're changing the name of the school store. It's a little antiquated. We're changing it to Retail Management 1 and Retail Management 2. We think it's a little bit more relevant of a title, and we don't hold classes in the school store itself, so it was a little confusing for some of the students. In our English, driver's ed, there's no changes. In our English department, we are removing our 11th grade GP, or General Preparatory course. This is the continued roll-up of our on-level D-Track Humanities courses. And then there were some corresponding verbiage changes in the description of our 11th grade English on-level course. So that's just to align with the roll-up of the D-Tracking. Creative writing, we are removing the creative writing. It hasn't run in 4 to 5 years. The last school year that creative writing ran was in the 1920 school year. And so we are currently going to be removing that course. It would have to be rewritten if we decided to add it back into the program of studies. The curriculum is a little antiquated, but we haven't been running that course for the last few years. The English Learners Development, or English Learner Department, we're adding a little bit of a description to that department. All departments have a little introductory description in the program of studies, and so we're adding that in for this department as well. We're removing courses 4 and 5, and because we're working with the MCIU and we're moving toward best practices in this department that include inclusive push and support as opposed to standalone courses with our multilingual learners. And so we are removing those courses. There are no changes in the Family Consumer Science department. The math department, we are making a little bit more accessible and reducing some of the prerequisites or recommendations. So for the fundamentals of algebra course, we are removing the grade 9 only condition because we do have students that come in, particularly our transfer students that come in and they need this course and they're not 9th graders. And so we need to remove that 9th grade only designation. And that's it for math. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Yep. And then our music department, we are working on growing our band, and our numbers are climbing a little bit, and we're hoping to get them up even more in the future years. We'd like to build in a little bit more flexibility for our band students, and we'd like to be able to work on specific skills based on the level of performance and their skills within the band. So we are breaking up the band into a 9th grade section and an 11th grade section. It will allow for more individualized attention to the students and their performance needs, but it also, even though we're designating a 9th and 10th grade section and 11th and 12th grade section, we are going to allow students who might have a conflict in their original designated section to schedule into the alternate section just for a little bit of extra flexibility so they don't have to choose between courses. So we will allow that. Music theory, again, we're changing the grade requirement from 11th and 12th to 10th through 12th. Again, more options, more flexibility. And you'll see throughout the program of studies, we're making sure that our language is consistent. So you will see successful completion of a recommended course throughout the program of studies. Science department, I know Dr. Mahalik did an excellent job last board meeting explaining the new science courses. Again, the purpose of these courses was to increase flexibility for increase student choice, taking a lot of our 1-credit courses and breaking them into 2 semester courses so students can pick and choose which topics they're more interested in. And they might be able to mix a life science with a physical science course and pick the topics that they are most interested in. So you'll see we will be changing our applied chemistry course. We're removing that course and adding the chemistry matters, as was explained last meeting. Same with applied physics. We're reducing these 1-credit classes to half-credit classes that they can either piggyback each other or they can be added on to the other half-credit classes that we are proposing. It gives students more choice, more options to explore additional topics, and You'll also notice that there is a decrease in the math requirements because we're focusing on the conceptual understanding of the sciences. Of course, we still have our other science courses that are more math intensive, but these courses are more conceptual in nature and allows the students to kind of mix and match the topics of interest. So chemistry matters and physics matters are basically the same approach. Physics honors, we're adding an honors class. We have a lot of students who are interested in the challenge of physics, heavy math skills course, but perhaps not interested in the 1.5 credit AP Physics 1 course that we offer. We still are offering that course. We're adding an additional physics course. So when students take a 1.5 credit course, it kind of gums up their schedule a little bit. And so honors physics is a 1 credit course. It allows for more open spaces in the student's schedule, still challenging, still math intensive, and still can prepare them for moving into AP Physics 2 or even AP Physics C. So it doesn't preclude them from doing anything like that. You'll see in these changes that AP Physics C, it says it removed the course. And that's because College Board actually took the AP Physics C curriculum, which includes mechanics and electricity and magnetism, and broke them up into two separate tests, pardon me. Each test is 3 hours long, and so the students that were taking this course were sitting for 6 hours of AP-C physics testing. And so this was a 1.5 credit course. We felt because College Board expanded the testing requirements and the curriculum for the AP Physics C course, we needed to allot more time. And it also allows students to choose which topics they're interested in. They don't have to take both mechanics and electricity and magnetism if they don't want to. So instead of a 1.5 credit course where both topics are being covered, there's one credit course for mechanics and one credit course for electricity and magnetism. And I know Dr. Mahalik explained all this. I probably went into too much detail. So the Physics C is broken up into 2 1-credit classes. We're changing the recommendation or prerequisite wording in chemistry into our to be consistent throughout the book. Instead of a 70% or better in Algebra 1, successful completion of Algebra 1. And that, again, allows a little bit more accessibility for more students. Project-based chemistry, we're changing that as well to successful completion of Algebra 1. The botany zoology course, which currently is a full year 1-credit course, is being split up into the 2 semester courses that students can mix and match, maybe botany and not zoology, vice versa. So we're splitting that into 2 semester courses. The honors, genetics, and microbiology, we're doing the same. We're still keeping them honors weighted credit, but we're breaking them up into 2 semester courses, one for genetics and one for microbiology. And that's it for science. The social studies department is part of the humanities roll-up of the D-Tract and courses. American Studies 2, we are changing the wording again from the prerequisite to recommended successful completion of American Studies 1. American Studies 2 honors, again, changing the wording for the recommended successful completion of American Studies 1. And then we are eliminating the GP level or general preparatory level of world studies. So this is our junior level social studies class, and we are eliminating the GP level. And we are adding in the on-level world studies. Again, it's the continued rollout, or roll-up, I should say. And we're very excited, as you heard at the last board meeting, to be adding the AP African American Studies. This has been a hot topic by our students and lots of student requests for many years, and we're very excited to be adding that to our program of studies. The special education department, there's no changes in the courses that they are offering. Tech Ed, we are, as you know, in our Tech Ed department, we house our Project Lead the Way, which is a national engineering program. And the Project Lead the Way folks nationally have changed the name of their capstone course. It used to be called EDD, Engineering Design and Development. It is now called the Project Lead the Way capstone course. So we had to change the name for that. That was from the organization. And then we're trying to get more students involved in our Project Lead the Way program. And so we are changing the prerequisite, we're removing the prerequisite to our entry-level course, our IED course, our Introduction to Engineering and Design. The Project Lead the Way folks update the curriculum almost yearly or every other year, and the math requirement is really not needed for the new updated curriculum. Well Fit and Driver's Ed, no changes. World Language, we currently have AP French and AP World Language classes. We had tagged them both as AP and dual credit, but the AP weighting in our GPA calculations actually is a higher weighting, and so we're keeping those at AP level. They are AP level courses, and we are looking into possibly adding honors level level 4 honors classes, and we're trying to establish some dual credit classes, hopefully moving forward for the level 4 instead of the AP. Same is for German and for Spanish. And then the only thing that I want to add that is not in the program of studies document that you have is just today, we were told that some of our dual credit classes that we currently have credit by exam through Westchester in the science department may not be able to be, and this is because of Westchester, and they're doing this with all of their participating schools. They may not be able to offer all of the same dual credit offerings as next year. So we are looking at additional colleges that may be able to provide dual credit offerings for the course or courses that Westchester is changing. We don't have a whole lot of details. We will certainly come back to you with more details on that, but that really just came out today. So, any questions?
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Garriello, for that summary. Any questions from the board?
A few unrelated things.
Sure.
In the very beginning where you added the attendance
Yes.
information, this might make it too long, I don't know. But I was wondering, because it talks about lawful and or unexcused absences, maybe defining what those are. I know as a parent, I wouldn't necessarily know. I know they can go to the link, but I don't think most people will actually click on the link, you know.
We can certainly add that in.
Yeah.
Add definitions for excused versus unexcused.
Yes.
You got it.
Exactly. And I assume there's a reason that you use lawful in one place and excused in a different, maybe they mean slightly different things, but, or maybe it's, if you can use the same language for both, that might be less confusing for
You
parents.
got it, yeah.
I was sad to see creative writing go, partially as a parent of a student who wanted to sign up every single year and it was never offered, but also as somebody with this background. One of the things I've noticed as a parent is that at the high school, our English language arts is really heavy on the literature and really light on the language part. And, you know, you sign up for one English lang class and then all of your others are all lit classes. And obviously students still have journalism that they can sign up for, but I think for career readiness, with writing being so much very important, obviously reading is too, but it might be helpful to see if you can find some sort of a replacement for that you can actually offer.
Sure. I will say that the 9th and 10th grade courses, for 11th and 12th grade, you're right, we are definitely literature heavy. In 9th and 10th grade, because that's driven by the Keystone test and the curriculum, which is really a literacy test as opposed to a literature test, the 9th and 10th grade tend to be a little bit more literacy focused, reading, writing heavy. 11th and 12th, more literature, absolutely. Just, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then I might have missed this. Maybe it's in a different spot than I would have looked for it. At some point, I believe it was a year ago, we approved and I believe it was L-Tri-C offering a virtual sign language course.
Yes.
Is that in here?
We're not changing it. That's why it's not in this document, but we are offering it and it's packed. And yes, we had a lot of student interest and a lot of students signing up for that course, and it's running currently.
Okay, good to hear. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for the questions. Dr. Whitney?
Yeah, just a few
Sure.
not to get too much in the weeds, but a couple of small scale questions. I echo the sadness about creative writing, and also strikes me is that that's a golden opportunity, not to dictate what happens in the classroom, but that's a golden opportunity to explore generative AI, right? Through, that's the intersection that these students are going to have to confront. So that's just a comment. For the symphonic band, I'm glad to hear our numbers are going up. That's exciting.
Yes.
And I know you said there's some flexibility about if they can't make it to one section, they could enroll in the other. But was there any discussion about, instead of separating by grade level, separating more by experience
Ability
level
or
and ability?
There was a lot of discussion, and this was our first step, and we haven't excluded that option. I know, like, for instance, our choir, we have auditioned choirs, and so that is definitely on the table, something to discuss. But for right now, with a brand-new director, moving forward, we want to get our numbers up first, because the more singletons, individual courses we add, the more it locks the schedule up. And we're trying to first get more students into band, and then hopefully next year, I'll be back here at this time with some good news on that.
Cool. Great, thank you. And can you just clarify, I mean, I understand it, but you're saying all the wording is changing to successful completion versus a particular number. Can you just talk a little bit about the rationale behind that?
Sure. If a student has, we feel if we have, the student's gone through our coursework and they've passed the course, we feel that for the courses that we've changed this to, that should be enough to qualify. We don't want a 65. Yes, you've passed the course, but we don't want that 65 to preclude you from moving on and trying out some of these other courses. So it's just a smidge change, but hopefully it will allow more students to try out. And as students mature and grow and they learn, a score that they received in 7th, 8th, 9th grade, we really don't want that score dictating what they can take in 11th, 12th grade.
Yeah.
So that's the thinking behind it.
So it allows a little more flexibility, a little more.
Absolutely.
Great. And then final question, just, and you mentioned we're trying to get the project leadway numbers up as
Yes.
well. Are we able to handle the capacity and the demand for project
You want me to
leadway?
answer that after the architect presentation and things?
I guess there's hand in hand. Yeah.
We have traveling teachers, and some of our courses are computer-based. They're not build stuff. So we are able to possibly move some of our Project Lead the Way courses into a more traditional classroom, and you don't need the tech ed classroom. We have the 3D printers that are relatively small and desktop, and so we are able to handle more of these numbers. There is a point where we are full. Our tech ed department is very popular, and we have lots of electives that oversubscribed. And so we can't offer all sections of everything because of limitations, a variety of limitations. But we would like to focus on the Project Lead the Way and try to get those numbers up, and because we can handle some of those courses in a more traditional room.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you for those questions. Ms. Ford?
Just wanted to echo again the sentiment about the creative writing. And I wanted to ask, was there anything comparable since that one's not running?
So we do not. We have public speaking, we have our ETV, we have film and broadcasting, we have our journalism classes. The students who take journalism classes, and we have journalism 1 through 4, don't necessarily have to be reporters on the Stinger, but they are working in that medium. We don't have any other specific creative writing course, no.
Hopefully that'll come back. My first thought was, in my background in managing people, if I had a nickel for the adults who ended up needing to go to centers for writing excellence, for business writing, because they just never picked up the necessary skills to communicate in writing effectively. And so that's always a need.
It is, and that's a major focus of the Keystone exams at the end of 10th grade. So that is why the reading and writing and literacy component is heavy in 9th and 10th. It's not necessarily creative writing like this course, but it is certainly the focus, a heavy focus on writing and reading and all literacy skills prior to that exam.
Thank you.
And I will say, there's lots of writing, lots of all types of writing happening in 11th and 12th grade as well, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions, comments? Well, thank you for that overview.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. The next item is policy. We have a third reading of the current policies under review. It's my understanding that there are no updates from the last reading. If there's no questions or follow-up from the board, I'm simply going to ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, no further questions. Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mr. Kelly,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Dr. Whitney,
Aye.
Ms. Bowman,
Aye.
Mr. Falegi,
Aye.
Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski,
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. On to other educational entities. We have a report from Dr. Whitney on CLIU.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Levinson. This is a report from the CLIU board meeting on October 21st, 1 week ago. Of note, a couple of presentations from CLIU programs, one on the emotional support programs, which take place at the 3 schools that CLIU operates. These are the programs that serve the students with the highest levels of emotional and behavioral needs. And just for a sense of perspective, this is approximately 90 students across the IU. And so we heard a little bit about how these, some of the ways that these schools operate, some of the programs that they offer, and the way that they try to support the whole child and really try to keep their academics up at the same time that they're attending to their emotional behavioral needs. Also got a presentation from the curriculum instruction and educational technology area. It was an interesting, useful overview of the services that area offers to all districts in the IU. There's a set of services that are no fee, and this include things like support that can be given for school climate improvement plans, professional learning resources. They host a number of summits and workshops. Most recently, they had a really successful networking day for specialists from across the 14 IU districts. These are arts, tech ed, FCS teachers. And last year they hosted this day. It was about 60 people participated. This year it was 140, so a really successful opportunity to bring all of those specialists together and share best practices and really learn from one another. They have and I asked a question of which of their services are the least utilized, that they would like to see more utilized, and they mentioned that they have a STEM lending library. This was originally federally funded, and so there are things like 3D printers and other types of STEM learning equipment that can be loaned out to any district that needs it. And they say they really haven't had many districts take them on. So that's one thing that to keep in mind. They also run student programs like competitions, reading Olympics, esports teams, things like that. So they really try and engage a lot of students across the IU. Then there are fee-based services that they offer, which a lot of them are in professional development, certification. They are, accredited certification for superintendency, special education, secondary math, and other things. And so they sort of gave an overview of those particular services. And then finally, there was an item on the agenda that was voting for the dissolution of the CLIU from a statewide network of internet connectivity that was originally established in the 1990s that serves all the 17 IUs from across the state and is still in place. And now we're in a place where local internet providers provide much more competitive pricing for as opposed to this statewide consortium. So this requires official approval of dissolution from all of these 17 participating IUs. So needless to say, we voted to dissolve the PAIU net, as it's called, to instead use local internet providers. And that is my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Whitney. Any questions? Okay, again, appreciate your efforts on that. Next update is from LCTI, from the Joint Operating Committee. I will be providing that summary for you this evening. The Joint Operating Committee members held a meeting on Wednesday, October 23rd. Highlights from that meeting's agenda include the following, as reported by the Executive Director, Dr. Grinewalt, and members of the administration, and also as actions taken by the JOC. First, Dr. Matthew Link, Superintendent of Northern Lehigh School District, was appointed as the new Superintendent of Record at LCTI. He replaces Dr. Steckel from Whitehall Copley School District, who resigned recently to take a position in private industry. LCTI is working with its council of superintendents to plan out its future facilities, programmatic service, et cetera, needs over the next 5 years. LCTI is participating in an upcoming apprenticeship conference in November and is also applying for a Pennsylvania STEM Innovation Planning Grant to help with its rebranding of its Career Academy program. We heard about the presentation of the 2024 LCTI Friend of CTE Award, which was given to Mrs. Lynn Erickson, who is the Executive Director of the Da Vinci Science Center. She was genuinely excited to get that award, and hearing about the new Da Vinci Center, it's highly recommended that if you haven't been there, to spend some time there, because it's really been a spectacular redesign. On October 10th, members of LCTI participated in the Tech and Talent of Tomorrow's Lehigh Valley event held at the Da Vinci Science Center and hosted by the Lehigh Valley Economic Development Council. The focus was on recruitment and retention of technical talent in the Lehigh Valley, and LCTI is seen as a crucial partner in accomplishing this goal. LCTI participated in the Greater Chamber of Commerce Manufacturing Day, where the welding program was promoted, along with its secondary and adult education offerings. Again, it was an opportunity to promote the impact of LCTI's programs on local manufacturing. The Occupational Advisory Council for LCTI held its annual meeting on October 16th with over 350 in attendance. There is a diverse and broad array of local organizations and companies that was represented in the OAC, and LCTI, as part of the program, look to showcase the things that it's been doing so that its OAC is informed. The LCTI In-Service Day was held virtually on October 14th, where training was given on promoting a positive school environment and a culture of safety. Counselors at LCTI were given the opportunity to tour LVHN and ATAS manufacturing to help them with guiding students on opportunities in the area. Dr. Dipal Kapadia, LCTI's Director of Information and Educational Technology, reported on his recent trip to Germany as a member of a 9-member team from Pennsylvania that went to learn about Germany's apprenticeship study programs. They learned about their different CTE schools and manufacturing opportunities and how the program is working to secure skilled labor, to place various at-risk groups into the workforce, and to grow the teacher pipeline into CTE, which are actually very similar things and challenges that we're trying to do here in the U.S. and in Pennsylvania. In very rough terms, I believe that I heard that around 30 to 40% of the student population enters the CTE programs in Germany, which requires participants to hold apprenticeships with about 70% of their educational time spent working at their company. Roughly 90% of those apprenticeship students get hired into their host companies, and Dr. Kapadia reported some important takeaways for how LCTI can leverage its relationships with local industrial organizations like the LVEDC, the MRC, et cetera, and how to best structure its own apprenticeship programs to deliver success to its students. So it was a very fruitful visit for him. LCTI wants to again announce that they are hosting its open house from 6 to 8 p.m. on November 14th in an effort to promote student recruitment and to showcase itself to the community. Finally, the JOC approved the 2025 JOC seat allocation among its participating districts. East Penn will thankfully again be able to field 4 seats as part of the 21-seat board. And that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Okay, well, I wowed you with my summary. Great. Moving on to announcements, we held an executive session this evening where the topic was litigation. Our next meeting, regular board meeting, will be on Monday, November 11th at 7:30 in this room. And with no further business, I'd like to get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?